Hi, I'm Micah Larsen, Rogue Persuasion Scientist, and this video is a little different than the ones I have been creating recently. As you can see, I'm still in the hospital in the labor and delivery unit as I have been for the past few weeks, but tomorrow is February 10th. And if you know me really well, you know that I'm a scientist and I'm not superstitious, and that February 10th is a really important day for me. On February 10th, 2015, my biological son was born to a different mother. I did an anonymous egg donation when I was a graduate student in Texas. And basically I signed away my right to know anything and everything about my biological child, except for when he was born. So this is what I know. Tomorrow is his 4th birthday, and he was born 6 pounds, 3 ounces, just like me. But the night before my surgery, I got an email from my lawyer with a letter from his intended parents describing what his life would be like. His mom is tall like me. His dad is an engineer and plays guitar. And he would grow up surrounded by his cousins and eating organic vegetables that came from his mom's garden. And they had had 6 miscarriages, and this was their Hail Mary. And at the end, they thanked me for being their silver lining, which was the single most humbling thing that I had ever experienced. And from that day on, silver linings have been a very important theme in my life and a way to cope and persuade myself. Especially because bringing my donor son into the world was a much more difficult experience than I anticipated. In fact, at my very first appointment at the fertility office, my doctor told me that I didn't have any viable eggs. So I had passed the psychological exam and the genetic testing, but it didn't look like my ovaries were fertile at all. So not only was I not capable of donating anything, I would never be able to have my own kids. So they switched my meds and hoped for the best and made an appointment for an ultrasound a few weeks later. And I invited my friend at the time, who was in med school, to come with me to my follow-up appointment to see if they were right. He held my hand, and I watched his face as he looked up at that ultrasound screen. And when he smiled, I knew that I was going to be able to someday have my own kids if I chose. Little did I know that years later, we would be married and looking at a different ultrasound screen at this little shape that would become our own son. Eric is a huge silver lining. And the first time I ever saw him cry was when he read me that letter from my lawyer. And that was the first time that I knew that I really loved him. So silver linings helped me get through the aftermath of my egg donation, which wasn't easy either. The day after my surgery, my ovaries overstimulated and filled with blood and started cutting off their own supply. So in this huge ironic twist, I nearly lost my own fertility again. And hormones wrecked me for more than a year as I waited to get news of whether the egg donation had worked. I had postpartum depression, nearly dropped out of graduate school. Thinking about my biological son physically hurt me, which was totally weird because I didn't know that you could miss someone so badly you'd never met. But knowing he was filling this huge hole in his new family was a silver lining too. And going through all this in the beginning of my relationship with Eric, for a lot of which we were living 1,000 miles apart, made it really easy to say yes when he asked me to marry him. So every February 10th that we spent together after that was kind of bittersweet. And we would mark the occasion for Donor Baby. And on February 10th, 2018, Eric and I decided to commemorate the event by doing a Valentine's Day 5K together here in Missoula just to make the day a little better. And that day, I was already trying to ignore the fact that something was going on with my body. And afterwards, I told Eric that I was pretty sure I was having a miscarriage. And he agreed. And as it turned out, I was. And it took weeks to resolve. And for months, it was more emotionally painful than I could have anticipated, much like the egg donation. It was this intense, acute feeling of loss. But the silver lining of the miscarriage was that I learned that for the first time in my life, I really knew that I wanted to have my own baby. So now tomorrow is February 10th, 2019. And Eric and I are here in the labor and delivery unit where I've been living for weeks with preeclampsia, a condition that basically makes me and my organs and brain sicker and sicker until baby can come out. We've been counting down the days until he'll be strong enough to face the world on his own, even though it's about 6 weeks earlier than we planned. And against all odds, our doctor picked our induction date for February 10th. And this is really about silver linings. And as a persuasion scientist, I might look for patterns, but I'm not superstitious. I can tell you that focusing on silver linings is powerful. And it's a great way to persuade yourself to get through some of the toughest times. And for me, there are some real silver linings coming through right now. First and foremost, that we have learned just how much we can rely on some of our friends and family. I'm completely humbled by how generous they are, and I've learned a huge lesson how to let other people help me and care for me when I need it. Another silver lining is that Even though Eric has practiced OB and I have gone through multiple facets of fertility and now motherhood, we have been able to see how sometimes fertility and motherhood are related and sometimes how they aren't, and appreciate all the different ways they can show up, like IVF, surrogacy, donation, foster parenting, adoption, and mentoring. So I don't believe in miracles or superstition, but I do believe strongly in silver linings. And one of them is that we can appreciate what's about to happen tomorrow way more than we could have if it hadn't been for all of those difficult times that we had been through together. And we are sure that what's about to come is going to be the biggest and best silver lining of them all.